Chag Sameach, everybody. We said last year, why is this Seder different than all other Seders? But we had no idea then that this Seder would be different as well. And so here we are, and this year it really feels like we're starting to emerge from our narrow constrictions of Mitzrayim, the narrow places that we translate as Egypt, as we feel some hope on the horizon. Some of us have been vaccinated and some of us have been waiting patiently, and sometimes it's a big challenge waiting to become eligible to be vaccinated and find the right vaccine. And so I just want to say that I'm wishing you all a Zman Cherutenu. That's one of the ways that we describe Passover, is this time of our freedom, that should come soon. And we all say together, Amen. I'm so grateful that we're all alive and here to be able to celebrate, and it's just amazing what we've been through, so many stories, and tonight is a time of stories. So as I encourage you to be at your Seder tables, continue with your own personal stories of this year, what your journey has been like, so that you can remember it and tell it to the future generations.
Kadesh Urchatz Karpas Yachatz Magid Rachtza Motzi Matzah Maror Korech Shulchan Orech Tzafun Barech Hallel Nirtzah.
Did you learn that melody growing up?
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I love it. That's not the melody I usually use, and yours is so beautiful. So here we are. We're going to light the candles for Pesach, and the blessing is Ner Shel Yom Tov. And then Rabbi Shifra suggested that we also add a blessing of Shechianu, just because we are alive. As the blessing says, we are sustained and able to reach this moment. So here we are. And I'll light the candles, and I invite you to join me. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel yom tov. Blessed are you, Adonai, sovereign of the universe, who makes us holy, and through your mitzvot give us the blessing of lighting these festival lights. So this is a song that's written by Bruce Coburn, and he's one of our favorite musicians. I'm speaking for myself, Rabbi Shifra, and others, especially in the Rock Shabbat band. And I heard this song, I think it's been about 2 years. It's been about 2 years. And I just was really moved by it. And some of you who've been to Rock Shabbat have heard it. So you'll have the words and you can join me. 40 years in the wilderness, getting to know the beasts, projected and reflected on the greatest and the least. 40 years of days and nights, angels hovering near, kept me moving forward, though the way was far from clear. And they said, take up your load, run south to the road, turn to the setting sun. Sun going down, got to cover some ground before everything comes undone. Take up your load, run south to the road, turn to the setting sun. Sun going down, got to cover some ground before everything comes undone. comes undone. 40 years in the wilderness, dancing with the flies, dazzled by the visions rolling out before my eyes. Angel-made graffiti, demons in disguise. You could trade away your birthright for another day's supplies. Or you could take up your load, run south to the road, turn to the setting sun. Sun going down, got to cover some ground before everything comes undone. Take up your load, run south to the road, turn to the setting sun. Sun going down, got to cover some ground before everything comes undone. Comes undone. Rising with the height of land, falling with the crowd. Spirits in the scouring wind call my name out loud. Said you could go to heaven, or you could go to hell. Or you could hang out in between in the place you know so well. Or you could pick up your load, run south to the road, turn to the setting sun. Sun going down, got to cover some ground before everything comes undone. Take up your load, run south to the road, turn to the setting sun. Sun going down, got to cover some ground before everything comes undone, comes undone.
So Pharaoh and Moses, thank you so much for being a part of this telemed conflict resolution session. Why do the two of you think you're here today?
You know, things have been pretty rough, honestly.
Moses, would you say that's really true?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's been rough, but it doesn't have to be rough anymore.
I just don't understand. You don't want to be my slaves anymore?
No, we do not.
Pharaoh, what does it feel like to hear Moshe say that he and his people don't want to be your slaves anymore?
You know, it really hurts. It feels like we've done some beautiful things together. I mean, we couldn't have built these pyramids if you weren't our slaves. And those pyramids wouldn't be a wonder of the world for years to come if it wasn't for what we've built together.
Yeah, but now it's time for us to go.
But I think there's so much more we could still do together. We could keep building wonders of the world. We could build a great wall or hanging gardens. We could build a great library. There's a site in Alexandria that I think would be perfect for a great library.
What you don't understand is that me and my people don't want to do those things. We want to go to our homeland, to the promised land.
Ugh, this homeland. Always with this homeland. You think life's going to be so much better in this magical homeland? Well, I don't.
It's got to be better than this.
Moses, what happens for you when Pharaoh disregards your wish to go to your homeland?
It's more what happens to him. God's going to keep plaguing him and his people, you know.
It's the worst. First, the waters turned to blood. Then there were frogs and locusts and so many other things. So many things.
And yet, you keep resisting what God's telling you, which is that our relationship is over.
Why do you keep resisting, Pharaoh?
My heart, it just feels hardened.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think I saw Moses' relatives, Jacob and Joseph, getting along so well with my dad, the previous Pharaoh, all those years. And honestly, I feel jealous. Like, why can't I have that with the Jews too?
And yet you have the exact opposite.
It's true.
Sometimes the best way to love someone is to let them go, Pharaoh.
This is your last chance. You saw what God just did to the firstborn.
So what will you do, Pharaoh? Will you let Moses and his people go?
Okay, fine. Fine, whatever. Fine. Okay, sure.
That didn't sound so very sure.
I'm sure. I am. I'm sure. Just go. Go. Just go.
And you won't change your mind, really?
As of this moment, I can promise I won't change my mind.
Moses, what would happen if Pharaoh changes his mind again?
I don't know, but I don't think he wants to find out.
So, this concludes our counseling?
Well, I guess it does, if you think this is a real sea change for you, Pharaoh. Do you agree, Pharaoh, that this is a real sea change for you?
I believe it is.
Do you agree, Moses?
We'll see what happens to the sea.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu im kol ha'amim, ורומם עם כל לשון, והקדישנו במצוותיו. ותיתן לנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה, מועדים לשמחה, חגים וזמנים לששון, את יום החג המצות הזה, זמן חירותנו, the season of our freedom. Mikra Kodesh Zecher Letziat Mitzrayim, Kivanu V'charta V'yotanu Kiddashta Im Kol Ha'amim, U'moadei Kodeshecha B'simcha V'sason Ilchatanu, Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, melech haolam, borei me'orei ha'esh, borei me'orei ha'esh. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, melech haolam, hamavdil ben kodesh lechol, hamavdil ben kodesh lechol. בין אור לחושך, בין ישראל לעמים, בין יום השביעי לששת ימי המעשה, בין קדושת שבת לקדושת יום טוב הבדלת, ואת יום השביעי מששת ימי המעשה קידשת. הבדלת וקידשת את עמך ישראל בקדושתך. ברוך אתה אדוני, המבדיל ומגשר בין קודש לקודש. ברוך אתה אדוני Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri
There are 2 hand washings in the Seder, in the order of the Seder, and this is the first one that is usually done just by the leader of the Seder. The Urchatz, the Rachtza, is later on before the eating of the matzah. I want to share with you this beautiful prayer that is from that same Haggadah, the new Reform Movement Haggadah. It's a beautiful prayer, a meditation. In silence, I pour upon my hands water from the cup of life. As I feel it on my skin, I am refreshed and renewed for a life of purpose. As it flows over my hands, it reminds me to cleanse myself of unworthy pursuits and petty concerns. And this water is pure. So too, let the works of my hands be pure. As water has the power to heal and revive, so too may I use my strength to sustain life now and always. We've all been washing our hands so much the last year. May we have this intention as we wash our hands for this Seder.
Karpas blessing. I'm going to talk about where your Karpas is from.
Well, ours is from our garden. Peter grew it. And this is always the first taste of food is always special. It's something that people are really looking forward to. And it represents the promise of spring. So, you know, we're hoping that with spring, there will be new life.
Beautiful. So why don't we have salt water here?
I'll take the parsley and dip it in the salt water and say the bracha, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri ha'adamah.
Amen.
It's time to explain the items on the Seder plate. Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. So the Paschal lamb, the Pesach, it represents the lamb that was sacrificed and the blood was put over the doorpost. Now, my grandfather, who was an Orthodox rabbi, taught that his teacher, Rav Kook, said that it's acceptable to use a beet. So because a beet kind of looks like blood, I mean, when you can see it looks like it bleeds, that it is represents the blood put on the mantle of the doorpost when the angel of death passed over the houses of the Israelites.
And Rav Kook was he was the first chief rabbi of Israel before Israel was even a state, right? So
yes.
He was really a very important rabbi.
And in fact, he was a vegetarian.
Yay.
Yeah. Okay, and then matzah, I showed the matzah before, and probably everyone knows the story that the Israelites were not prepared to leave Egypt. And so even though they had been told that they were going to leave, they really didn't believe it. So they had their bread rising. And when it was time to leave, they took their bread with them. They threw it on their backs, and the hot sun baked it into matzah. And so maror is the bitter herb. It's the horseradish. And Rabbi Paula has Bubby's Maror here. It's like a little commercial for Bubby's Maror. It's the bitter herb, and it symbolizes the bitterness of slavery and bitterness in life.
And you made charoset.
I did. I made charoset, and of course apples and nuts, and then a little bit of grape juice or wine. And most people use walnuts, but you can use any nuts, and some people put raisins, and some people put dried apricots.
I do dates and oranges too.
Yeah,
Sephardic. And
it's supposed to look like the mortar from the bricks. And actually, when I was in Egypt, we saw that people still make bricks out of mud and straw there, just like adobe in Mexico. And so it really does look like that. And then we did talk already about the sprig of parsley, which represents the Karpas represents the spring, the first growth of spring. And then the egg, which is traditional to have on a Seder plate, represents the circle of life, this rebirth and the circle of life. And in fact, this tradition of eating a meal and holding up different things comes from the Roman Symposium, because as you may realize that the Jews were under Rome during this time when the Passover was established. So there was a tradition of a Roman symposium where the rich nobles would lie on couches and intellectualize about philosophy, and they would hold up different foods and say, this egg symbolizes the rebirth of spring. And that's where we got the lying on pillows too, from the Roman Symposium. And also they drank wine.
Right. Reclining.
Right.
So we have a number of different things on this Seder plate. It's very crowded. I think there's almost as many, where there have been many jokes that have said that now we need to make bigger Seder plates. But I should also say, since Rabbi Schiffer's been sharing about where her matzah cover came from, this Seder plate was a gift from beloved friends for Ari and I when we were married. And so it also has really special meaning for me. But so many of you already know the orange on the Seder plate, and because Jews like to argue, there's different stories about it. One is that Susanna Heschel, who's the daughter of Abraham Joshua Heschel, may his memory be for a blessing, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, she was at a Seder and she saw that people were putting a crust of bread on a Seder plate to symbolize lesbian LGBTQ inclusion. And she said, instead of doing that, let's put an orange on the Seder plate. And then there's another story that people argued to say that it was more about women's role in being included as rabbis in Jewish tradition, that's why we put an orange on the Seder plate. So I'll let you do your own research and see what you come up with, because every year we tend to have a little discussion about it. A number of years ago, and I haven't been shopping, a number of years ago, Trua, the rabbinic call for human rights, started to put a tomato on the Seder plate, and I don't have a fresh tomato, so I have a can of tomato paste, because that is a way of remembering all of the people who pick our food, who, especially in Immokalee, Florida, where most of our tomatoes come from, and the fair food fight. So if you want to learn more about the tomato on the Seder plate, you could even Google tomato rabbis, because rabbis have been going to Immokalee, Florida to advocate for those workers. And then we have branches of the olive tree that are actually taken from my olive tree in my front yard to symbolize peace in the Middle East. And a few years ago, we started putting free trade chocolate on our Seder plates to symbolize the slave labor, child labor that's used to harvest cocoa. And so what we want to make a commitment to buying only fair trade chocolate, which is just so important. And then last year, the newest item that I started seeing that people were putting on the Seder plates was shoelaces, because when immigrants were being put into detention camps, which they are still in, their shoelaces were being taken away from them. And so I think that's an important reminder as well. And then I just decided, with Rabbi Schiffer's support, that we wanted to put a glove on the Seder plate to hold in our hearts all of our health workers, our doctors, our nursing assistants, all the people that are cleaning the rooms, all of the people that are doing so much work to try to keep us safe and to take care of our loved ones, and even those we don't know who are in need of support. So today, I decided that we needed to add a glove to the Seder plate. And again, you might need to buy a bigger Seder plate. The rabbis teach that the reason that we have the Seder plate, and this is in the Talmud, is that it's there for the sake of education, l'shem chinuch, because the Seder is all about asking questions. And so when we put these symbols there, they're meant to stimulate conversation and questions. So I want to invite you to do that in your own home as well. Do you want to talk about your incredible matzah cover that you have for the 3 matzot?
Well, I do. So this matzah cover was made by my great-grandmother for my grandmother. and it is a precious family heirloom in my family. It was made in Yerushalayim, and it says here Yerushalayim, and as some of you know, my grandmother was born in Yerushalayim, and her family goes back in Yerushalayim for many generations, for hundreds of years. So I've had family living in Jerusalem for at least 250 years that I know of. And it says on this cover, Lechavod Chag HaMatzot, in honor of the holiday of the matzah, which is of course Pesach, Yerushalayim. And then it says Shanat Tav Reish Tzadi Gimel, which I believe is 1932. So this was made for my grandparents' wedding by my great-grandmother and handed down to me from my mother. And then you may know that a lot of the matzah covers have these 3 pockets inside, one for Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael, one for each of the 3 matzahs for Passover.
Lachma Anya D'achaloo, Avdallah, Be'ara Demitzrayim, Be'ara Demitzrayim, Lachma Anya D'achaloo, Avdallah, Be'ara Demitzrayim, Be'ara Demitzrayim, Lachma Anya D'achaloo, Avdallah, Be'ara Demitzrayim, Be'ara Demitzrayim.
Chag Sameach. When Rabbi Paula first asked me to make a short 5-minute video on food justice and our work at Food What, I thought this would be a relatively easy task. But in collecting my thoughts to share with you, the first theme that quickly arises is actually the incredible complexity in speaking about our food and our food system and the related justice issues. I'm not going to pull out any dictionaries or dive into any technical definitions or explanations of things. I'm just going to pull from my last decade and a half at Food What, which makes me realize I should introduce myself. My name is Doron. I'm the founder and executive director of Food What, and Food What is a youth empowerment and food justice organization here in Santa Cruz County. Now, in its most simplest form, we can understand food justice as the justice issues relating to our food system for consumers, producers, and the earth. I like to think of food justice as all the work we need to do to fix our food system so that it respects and takes care of everyone and the planet, and the deep spiritual work of healing from historical and current oppression as it relates to food. Now, I'm not talking about us as Jews needing to eat matzah for 7 days, but I will share that somehow every year during Passover, at Food What, we end up making the most delicious pretzels from scratch with the youth in our spring program, and I have to sit there watching them tell me that these are better than the pretzels at the mall. Now, recently, my 6-year-old son Asa received a PJ library book about Passover. And after reading it at bedtime, he asked me about slavery. Why were the Jews slaves in Egypt? Why would anyone do that to another person? Hard questions. And same with our agricultural history in this country. As in Egypt, how could we not recognize the centralized role that racism has played, particularly in the agricultural history of African Americans in the United States? And this year, this Pesach, we would be remiss if we didn't engage in conversations that draw a line from that time all the way to present time, to George Floyd, to the racial reckoning that our country is now in. Food justice has a home in almost any conversation. This past year, during the plague of COVID, which one could argue as one of God's most well-crafted plagues, agricultural workers continued in the fields. You could see this at any time driving through Watsonville. Agricultural workers were and are considered essential labor, which to me actually seems quite right. When it came time for our county health department to determine the vaccine rollout plan, it was clear from an equity framework food and ag workers needed to be included in the occupations first to get the shot, and so they were. Now, ask any Jew about food, and boy, will you get a mouthful. We're a people rich in food story and tradition, and it's the same at Food What. We work with mostly Latinx youth from immigrant families, youth who are from or whose families are mostly from Mexico. And we do a workshop every summer where we ask, what is your favorite family gathering around food? Every youth in the circle explodes into story when they share their answers. So to transition now for a brief moment, I'd like to invite you to think about your high school health class or nutrition class. If it was anything like mine decades ago, it was an exercise in good and bad, very black and white. Nutrition was just for the human body as machine. Nothing about culturally appropriate foods or any conversation around food access. I remember years ago bringing our Food What crew up to a partner organization in Oakland and having a real conversation around this term food access. The youth in that organization shared with our crew about the incredible disproportionality of liquor stores to places where their families could access fresh, healthy, affordable produce. There wasn't a new leaf in their part of Oakland. And it's important to note that this food access conversation is equally present in rural areas as well. In the second year of Food What, a young man named Esdras engaged me in a conversation one day. He said how he thought it was great that we were running a low-income farm stand in beach flats, but often when he went home at night, his family didn't have food. When I asked him what he thought we should do about it, he shared that he felt that part of the summer job should be that each youth receives a CSA share, a box of produce each week that the youth would harvest off of the farm and bring home to their families. We have been doing Esdras' idea ever since, and youth take home thousands of pounds of produce that they grew and that they have a relationship with to their families each year. This is food justice. We don't tell youth at Food what they should or shouldn't eat. We simply add vibrant, nourishing, fresh produce to the meals the youth we serve are already cooking and eating. We create a positive environment, a welcoming community space around food. No shaming that you shouldn't be eating this or you should be eating that. And at Food What, youth have their hands in every aspect of the food system. They're growing the food, harvesting it to eat on site with their peers, and package to take home to their families. We're running food programs to address food access issues for people who need it most, so there's activism and job training. There are workshops around food for knowledge, but they're also rooted in youth power and agency. We're cooking with the food together, so youth find their own pathway into a long-term relationship with food. It's on their own terms, and it's relevant, and it's chosen, so it sticks. Now back to Watsonville for a second. Many of the youth we serve come from farm worker families, and one young woman, Vicky, years ago at our final dinner of the summer program, took to the mic and shared with great emotion how she received more respect in the single year that she worked at Food What than her mother received in her many, many years as a farm worker. This is a food justice issue. Now, when we as Jews sit around the Seder table, why do we retell the central story year after year of our people? My understanding is that we're taking a deep dive into the concept of freedom. We're trying to put ourselves into the shoes of our ancestors to really feel in our souls, not just in our mind, what liberation truly means. At our essence, Food What was created and serves countywide youth who are incredibly resilient, especially given their life stories and challenges, with a safe space through food and agriculture to explore their freedom and their liberation. When we close the Seder and we say L'Shana Haba'a B'Yerushalayim, I've never understood that to be literal. It's always stirred in my heart this idea of the world to come, of Moshiach, of a time of peace and justice and love, a time of true freedom and liberation. So in closing, I'd like to wish each of you and your loved ones the freedom and the liberation you seek. and I look forward to a time when food justice will no longer need to be spoken of because we will have healed. We will have built a food system that nourishes all equitably and intensively, and all the while caring for the planet. And let us say, Amen.
Avadim Hayinu. We were slaves, and now we are free. And I always want to remind us all that not all of us are free, and that the hope is that while we are not enslaved ourselves personally, physically in Mitzrayim, there are still people all over who are slaves, as we know, in our midst, people who are trafficked, even in our communities, and that we don't finish the work of redemption until we feel that we have made progress in redemption for all.
Avadim Hayinu, Hayinu, Ata b'nei chori, b'not chori, Avadim Hayinu, Ata b'nei chori, Avadim Hayinu, Ata b'nei chori, b'not chori. Avadim Hayinu, Hayinu, Ata b'nei chori, b'not chori, Avadim Hayinu, Ata b'nei chori, Avadim Hayinu, Ata b'nei chori, b'not chori. Avadim Hayinu, Avadim Hayinu.
Israel was in Egypt land. Let my people go. Pressed so hard they could not stand. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go.
Thus spoke the Lord, bold Moses said,
Let my people go.
if not, I'll smite your firstborn dead.
Let my people go.
Go down,
went to Egypt land.
My people go.
Let's make all pharaohs understand.
Let my people go.
Go down, Moses, way down Egypt land.
Tell all Pharaoh, let my people go.
Go down, Moses, way down Egypt land. Tell all Pharaoh, let my people go. Let my people go. Let my people go. Let my people
So this is the section of the narrative, the Magid, Lahagid, like the word Haggadah comes from that word. And I'm going to read for you the Exodus, a story in 7 short chapters that is in the Haggadah that was put together by the Velveteen Rabbi, Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt. Chapter 1. Once upon a time, our people went into Galut, exile, in the land of Egypt. During a famine, our ancestor Jacob and his family fled to Egypt where food was plentiful. His son Joseph had risen to high position in Pharaoh's court. Chapter 2. Generations passed and our people remained in Egypt. In time, a new Pharaoh ascended to the throne and ordered our people enslaved. In fear of rebellion, Pharaoh decreed that all Hebrew boy children be killed. 2 midwives named Shiphrah, there she is, and Puah defied his orders, claiming that the Hebrew women are so hardy they give birth before we arrive. Oh, right.
I like how people sometimes call it Shifra and Pula.
Pula? Oh, there we go. Shiphrah and Puah, Shiphrah and Paula. But how many of us have had like births where we couldn't have the midwives arrive because it was so fast? But in any case, through their courage, a boy survived. Midrash tells us he was radiant with light. Fearing for his safety, his family placed him in a basket and he floated down the Nile, and he was found and adopted by Pharaoh's daughter, who named him Moshe, because Min Hamayim Mishitihu, from the water she drew him forth. And she hired his mother Yocheved as his wet nurse. Thus he survived to adulthood and was raised as Prince of Egypt. Although a child of privilege, as he grew, he became aware of the slaves who worked in the brickyards of his father, and when he saw an overseer mistreat a slave, he struck the overseer and killed him. Fearing retribution, he set out across the Sinai alone. God spoke to him from a burning bush, which though it flamed was not consumed. The voice called him to lead the Hebrew people to freedom. Moses argued with God, pleading inadequacy, but God disagreed. Sometimes our responsibilities choose us. Chapter 4. Moses returned to Egypt and went to Pharaoh to argue the injustice of slavery. He gave Pharaoh a mandate which resounds through history: let my people go. Pharaoh refused, and Moses warned him that mighty God would strike the Egyptian people. These threats were not idle. 10 terrible plagues were unleashed upon the Egyptians. Only when his nation lay in ruins did Pharaoh agree to our liberation. Chapter 5. Fearful that Pharaoh would change his mind, our people fled, not waiting for the bread dough to rise. Our people did not leave Egypt alone. A mixed multitude went with them. From this we learn that liberation is not for us alone, but for all the nations of the earth. Even Pharaoh's daughter came with us and traded her old title, Bat Paro, daughter of Pharaoh, for the name Batya, daughter of God. Pharaoh's army followed us to the Sea of Reeds. We plunged into the waters. Only when we had gone as far as we could did the waters part for us. We mourn even now the Pharaoh's army drowned. Our liberation is bittersweet because people died in our pursuit. To this day, we relive our liberation that we may not become complacent, that we may always rejoice in our freedom. Okay. I'm going to sing a song about the Righteous Midwives, and it always reminds me of being at a conference for rabbis in Atlanta and being at the Ebenezer Baptist Church on a civil rights tour, and the preacher there from St. Louis told a story with 300 people or so in the sanctuary about the midwives, and she asked us who was going to step in and be the midwives. And it was so powerful to hear an African-American preacher sharing our story in a time that we so much need to step up and step in. Midwife is a woman who helps a mother to give birth. This is the story of the brave midwives who knew what life was worth. Pharaoh gave them an order with a wicked look in his eye. You may spare the Hebrew daughters, but the Hebrew sons must die. Shiphrah and Puah, the righteous midwives, they saved the children's lives. Shiphrah and Puah, the righteous midwives, they saved the children's lives. The midwives were courageous. Pharaoh's order was ignored. They knew that it was dangerous, but they trusted in God. Were it not for Shiphrah and Puah, many children would have died. Pharaoh could not destroy us, even though we know he tried. Shiphrah and Puah, the righteous midwives, they saved the children's lives. Shiphrah and Puah, the righteous midwives, they saved the children's lives.
When I think about the plagues now, I think about the plague that we're facing. And we are really facing a plague right now. And it's not only this plague. There have been many plagues. There have been species becoming extinct. There have been fires wiping out huge areas that are inhabited by people and by animals, and there's been so much loss.
Flooding, people losing their homes to flooding. I mean, it goes on and on and on, doesn't it?
Yeah, so we're living in a time where the plagues really are becoming much more real for us. Now, I think we lived through a golden time in our lifetimes where we could just take from the earth and not see the consequences. And now I think we're seeing the consequences. So the plagues maybe remind us that our ecology is fragile and that we can't just consume wantonly.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I think that what we're trying to do is to have the kind of compassion that we need to have for each other in this moment where we're all feeling vulnerable to the plagues. I mean, I think it's not, oftentimes when there are plagues, some populations are more vulnerable, and still in this moment, some populations are more vulnerable. People who are incarcerated are more vulnerable right now to what's going on. People who are unhoused are more vulnerable to this plague. So it is important for us to remember, while I can sit home in my house and distance from people, there are many people who can't even do that. So the plague definitely is hitting people in different ways, as most plagues do.
And the Torah actually highlights that, because the first plagues really didn't hit the palace.
Right.
It wasn't until the very end that Pharaoh realized that his disastrous path was actually going to be to even penetrate the palace walls.
Well, and I think it's also related to the hardened heart question, right? Of a time when, we harden our own hearts, and then we get to the place where our hearts are so hard that we can't even understand or feel the vulnerability of other people, just like Pharaoh. And it takes the shaking up for us to open our hearts, and it's so painful. It's just so painful to crack through that piece. And more than ever, it is really understandable to see why we diminish our cup this year. I feel like our cups are really diminished as we think about what we're all experiencing and what we have been experiencing, like you said, Rabbi Shifra, in terms of ecological disorder. And so my prayer is that as we remove these drops, we can further our commitment to really feeling the pain and having the pain cause us to take action together.
Amen.
Dam, blood. Svardea, frogs. Kinim, lice. Avov, insect swarms. Dever, cattle plague. Shechin, boils. Barad, hail. Arbe, locusts. Choshech, darkness. Makat bechorot, death of the firstborn. May we continue to feel and to act and to try to avert any future plagues. And we say together,
Amen.
Amen. So here's a contemporary Dayenu. If you, the author for this is unknown, but I'm going to read it and you can say Dayenu. When all workers of the world receive just compensation and respect for their labors, enjoy safe, healthy, and secure working conditions, and can take pride in their work, Dayenu. When governments end the escalating production of devastating weapons, secure in the knowledge that they will not be necessary,
Dayenu.
When technology is for the production and conservation of energy and our other natural resources developed so that we can maintain responsible and comfortable lifestyles and still assure a safe environment for our children, Dayenu. When the air, water, fellow creatures, and beautiful world are protected for the benefit and enjoyment of all, Dayenu. When all politicians work honestly for the good of all,
Dayenu.
When all women and men are allowed to make their own decisions on matters regarding their own bodies and their personal relationships without discrimination or legal consequences, Dayenu. When people of all ages, sexes, races, religions, cultures, and nations respect and appreciate one another, Dayenu. When our children grow up in freedom, without hunger, and with the love and support they need to realize their full potential, Dayenu. When all people have access to the information and care they need for their physical, mental, and spiritual well-being, Dayenu. When no elderly person in our society has to fear hunger, cold, or loneliness, Dayenu. When people everywhere have the opportunities we have to celebrate our culture and use it as a basis for progressive change in the world, Dayenu. Ilu hotzianu mi Mitzrayim, hotzianu mi Mitzrayim, Dayenu. Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. Ilu natan lanu et Torah, natan lanu et Torah, Dayenu. Everybody, Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. Ilu natan lanu et Shabbat, natan lanu et Shabbat, Dayenu. Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. So this is the second cup, and in the Haggadah that we have been drawing from, Promise of the Land, the second cup is dedicated to water, the circulatory system of our bodies and the circulatory system of the earth. Water reminds us of the Red Sea, the rivers, and the rain. In Hebrew, the word for pool and blessing share the same root letters, bracha. Water is the source of blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. L'chaim, l'chaim.
It's time for the Nishtana. I'd like to invite up Eli Mitchell to sing Nishtana for us with his mother, Jess.
Nishtana Hawaii Baze Miko Hawaii Bo Miko Hawaii Bo Miko Hawaii Bo
Shavuot Halelot Anu Ochim Chametz Matzah Chametz Matzah Halayla Hazeh Halayla Hazeh Kulo Matzah Halayla Hazeh Kulo Matzah Shavuot Halelot Anu Ochim She'ayirakot She'ayirakot Halayla hazeh Maror Halayla hazeh Maror Shavuot Halelot Ein anu matfilim Afilu pa'am echad Halayla hazeh Shetefet amin Halayla hazeh Shetefet amin Shavuot Halelot Anu Ochim Ben Yoshvin u'ben Mesubim Ben Yoshvin u'ben Mesubim Halayla hazeh Kulanu Mesubim. High five.
So this is The Four Children Approach the Future by Ariel Cates. So first of all, the four children appear in the Jerusalem Talmud, where Rabbi Chia, a student of Rabbi Judah the Prince, is quoted as bringing this parable. Rabbi Chia's text varies quite a bit from the text we know today. For one, the simple child is not simple, but stupid. But it is rabbis at the time of the collection of the Mishnah and Talmud who are creating this rubric, and so we proceed.
The wise child asks about the rules and commandments that govern the Seder and receives a full explanation of the details. This child looks to the future with the rules in mind, seeking structures and understanding that life necessitates systems. Looking toward the future, this child is savvy. What can I do within the structures I'm given, they might ask. In what ways do we search our surroundings for external rules that help us to structure our lives? How does this help? And how does this hurt? Do you look for structures, for open spaces, sometimes one or the other?
The wicked child asks their interlocutor what Passover means to them. This is a separation that incurs wrath, and the statement that this child would not have been among those saved because of a lack of collective self-identity. But are they looking for a more personal explanation of how to connect individually with what's going on and how to proceed? Taking in information from others' experiences in order to shape their own? This child might have done some self-education to ask a more targeted question, which might not have produced the same kind of wrath. Perhaps we can ask each other, what does it mean to you to experience the Seder as though you were personally liberated from Egypt? This child looks to the future perhaps with good boundaries and a different understanding of self. And what do we gain by othering this person who is a child in our midst? Do we really get to be arbiters of who would have been saved and who would not?
The simple child looks to the future totally baffled. What does this all mean? What the heck is going on? This child has an open demeanor. There's not a lot of ego here, and it's clear from what's being asked, which isn't actually that different from the wicked child. The only difference is the absence of the to you. But it's met with a much more tolerant kind of inclusion. By implying that we're all in this together, this child is given help understanding what's going on, approaching their communities with humility. Still, like the wicked child, their question doesn't show the deeper knowledge that would indicate self-education. This child is looking to the bigger picture, unlike the wise child who's looking for the micro level of life.
The child who does not know how to ask is present but silent, looking to the future with a kind of carelessness, perhaps, or alternately with paralysis. The thing about silence is that you can't always tell which is which. The rabbis use, "This is because of what God did for me here." It's the same othering and dividing language as we saw with the wicked child who doesn't get to be included in our collective. Not super merciful. What would have happened if the rabbis had asked this child a question? How do we embrace our ignorance with humility when we don't know how to ask? That's a lesson from the simple child, perhaps. Have there been times when we've assumed ignorance from someone's silence? The way I tend to look at the 4 children is that there are parts of them in each and every one of us. And I think the questions that are raised in this particular piece can inspire us to really think a little bit more about our own selves and about our children, which is what the Seder is all about, asking questions and having conversations.
I really like this depiction in the Haggadah called A Different Night of the 4 children representing all 4 children as books. And this was done by my friend David Wander, who actually was a student of mine when I was in rabbinical school. He was an artist who came to learn biblical Hebrew in my class. So this is an expression of what each of the 4 children is like. And so this is the Chacham, this is the wise child. And the wise child is a book with words on it. And it's a Siddur, it's a page of Torah. And then the wicked child is a book on fire. And this is a child who is not only rejecting what they got from Judaism, but is angry at Judaism and blaming and alienated. And I have to say that as a Jewish educator, and I think any Jewish educator would say this, that there are a certain percentage of students that come to class and they are angry. They're angry that they're there. They're angry that they're not out playing basketball or having fun. They're angry because they didn't choose to be Jewish and they feel like their parents are forcing them. Or they're angry for any number of reasons, and Judaism is the great foil for them to project their anger. And also, there have been, and I've encountered many people like this, who have actually been hurt by religion, who have been hurt by Judaism. And we know that GLBT folks in the Jewish community have been hurt by old ideas about gender roles, and
Jews of color
have
been rejected
and alienated. So this is the alienated student or child. And then this one, the blank book, is the simple child. This is the child that's open, but really is coming from no place, having not practiced Judaism at home, having not experienced really anything, but is open. And we have a lot of students like that who don't know Aleph. They've never celebrated Shabbat, and yet they're here at the temple. And then this is the child that doesn't know how to ask, the closed book. That this child's not open. Not only do you have to teach this child about Judaism, but before you teach them, you have to figure out where's the key that opens them, how to get that, even the openness to want to know what Judaism is. And so I love this depiction by David Wander.
Yeshkoch, it's very nice. Thank you. Now here's the real hand washing, the Rachtza. And we're each supposed to do that. And I know many of us have been washing our hands, as I said, a lot. And I read this sweet little piece that says that when we're washing our hands now, we can, instead of reciting happy birthday or something like that, we can sing a chorus of Dayenu. So there you go. So this is the time when we're actually going to say the blessing for washing hands. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al nitilat yadayim.
Amen. So this is when we lift all three matzot and we say the blessings, and then you break the middle matzah, which is already broken, into a piece for everybody, and you also break a piece from the top matzah, and they eat it together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat matzah. And now you eat from the top and the middle matzah while reclining on your pillow.
Unless you eat gluten-free matzah like me. Maror.
Yeah, it's time to eat from the bitter herbs. And so some people eat the maror on matzah, and some people eat the maror with charoset on matzah. And so usually people take the bottom matzah for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then the charoset too.
Mm-hmm.
So am I doing that?
Yep.
All right. I'm going to eat this delicious charoset. So we know that when we join together the maror and the charoset, we're making what's called a hillel sandwich. And in a sense, what we're doing is we're combining the sweetness and the bitterness, which is really what life is all about. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat maror. And now it's time to eat your meal.
So enjoy your Passover meal, everyone. And for those of you who got the Passover meal from Benjamin, we want to say especially that we know that for people who cater or who work in many, many different trades, that it's difficult for them to find work right now. And that, Benjamin, we love you, and we hope that everyone who works normally in places that are closed now, that you make it through this difficult time.
While we're eating dinner, most of the children will be going to look for the afikomen, right? Isn't that what usually happens?
Yeah.
They finish dinner before we do, and they're off looking around. I understand that the Jewish Museum of Maryland is going to be doing a virtual search for the afikomen. So you might, it's not available at this time, but maybe by the time your Seder happens, you could look for it and find it online if you want to try and do that. Yeah? And then the spiritual message of what's hidden is always something that I encourage us all to think about. What are the parts of ourselves that we have trouble recovering or uncovering? And that this safun, that's the section of the looking for the afikomen, is the word safun means hidden, and how are the ways that we might be able to be more vulnerable and uncover those parts within ourselves.
Now that reminds me of how we are really hidden from each other right now, because we can't meet as a community. We don't see right now the people who are watching this. And I think our challenge for this time is how to reveal ourselves in a way that we still feel connected, even though we're hidden from each other.
Amen, amen. Very, very important.
Brich Rachamanah, Malkat Yoma, Mare, Dehai Pita, Brich Rachamanah, Malkat Yoma, Mare, Dehai Pita. You are the source of life for all that is, and your blessings flow through me. You are the source of life for all that is, and your blessings flow through me. Brich Rachamanah, Malkat Yoma, Mare Dehai Pita. Brich Rachamanah, Malkat Yoma, Mare Dehai Pita. You are the source of life for all that is, and your blessings flow through me. You are the source of life for all that is, and your blessings flow through me, and your blessings flow through me.
The third cup is dedicated to the air. This cup calls to mind Ruach Elohim, the wind of God, hovering over creation, and the breath of life that God breathed into Adam's nostrils. It is a poignant reminder of the continuity of our breath, the air, and the weather. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. L'chaim.
For VaDor, Chayav Adam lirot, Chayav Adam lirot et atzmo, כאילו הוא יצא, כאילו הוא יצא ממצרים. בכל דור ודור חייב אדם לראות, חייב אדם לראות את עצמו, כאילו הוא יצא, כאילו הוא יצא, כאילו הוא יצא ממצרים. כל דור ודור חייב אדם לראות, חייב אדם לראות את עצמו, כאילו הוא יצא, כאילו הוא יצא, כאילו הוא יצא ממצרים.
Now it's time to open the doors of our homes for Elijah the prophet. And that feels especially poignant to me when we're all closed in our own homes. We've really shut the doors. And this time we open the door symbolizing that Elijah the prophet might come in. And who is Elijah? Elijah is the one who heralds the coming of the Messiah. He's the one who's supposed to announce that this is the time when the world will be as it could be, when people will rise to their potential, and the world will be at peace, and all the food will be distributed, and there will be enough for everyone. And we look forward to that time, and as Chana Senish said, I believe with a full heart in the coming of the Mashiach. I believe that it's coming. And so we sing for the Messiah to come. We sing for Elijah the prophet to come. But also Elijah is known to, in Jewish legends, especially Hasidic legends, to go from home to home dressed as a beggar, symbolizing that the people that we're the most afraid of or that we shun the most, any one of them could be the one that brings this change.
And we know that we keep a cup of wine. The 5th cup of wine is for Elijah, the prophet, Eliyahu Ha-Navi. And a tradition has been embraced for quite some time now to have a cup of water for Miriam Ha-Navi, which Rabbi Schiffer just pointed to, which is a reminder of the well that nourished the people in the wilderness, that Miriam's well, which the rabbis teach was created at the beginning of the world, before even physical creation came into being. Miriam's well was present.
And in my home, we add to Elijah's cup from our cups, symbolizing that if the Messianic time is going to come, it's going to be because everyone contributes. So I will contribute to Elijah's cup.
Eliyahu Ha-Navi, Eliyahu Ha-Tishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Ha-Giladi, Bimera v'yamenu, Yavo Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben David, Miriam Ha-Neviah, Oz bezimra beyada, איתנו לתקן את העולם. מרים תרקוד איתנו לתקן את העולם. במהרה בימינו כי תביאנו אל מי הישועה, אל מי הישועה. And we close the door.
Miriam the prophet, sister of Aaron, took her timbrel in her hand, and all the women followed after her with drumming and dancing.
And now we're at the Nirtzah, which is the conclusion of our Seder. The fourth cup is dedicated to fire. Fire is the energy of the world and also the destroyer. Fire calls to mind the burning bush, the lightning at Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, and the chariot of God. Fire is the element of the sun, of light, calling all things to emerge. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen l'chaim.
We are coming to the very end of our Seder, and I know that every year at the end we say L'shana haba'a b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. I want to add B'shana haba'a yachad, next year together, B'beit El, in our congregation, in our Kihila Kadosha. May we all join together in the social hall on that second night Seder where we celebrate and we learn and we ask good questions together, where the children are running around and our elders are sharing this wonderful ritual with us and everybody in between. May it be so. Here's the last piece I would love to share with you as we move from Pesach to Shavuot, from this time of liberation to the time of revelation, and to remind all of you that Rabbi Schiffer will be once again leading a Counting the Omer session every evening along with Cantor Elisa and our rabbinic intern Sarah Tzipora. This is written by Jacqueline Cudler. Revelation. For every exile who walked out of Egypt between walls of water, for everyone who remembered the feel of sea bottom underfoot, the sibilant roar of water rearing on the right On the left, someone forgot. Someone scanning the dry horizon for a well, or already mourning the musky smell of autumn in her father's fig trees, forgot the Hoshanas and by the bitter waters of Maror, forgot the flash of dancing feet, the shimmer of timbrels. For every proselyte at Sinai, someone never heard the horns at all. Someone turned back from the mountain to bank the fire, feed the baby, steal a secret moment with another. Revelation begins in attention. While the elders trembled before the word of God flowing down the scorched north flank of Sinai, someone rising from a last long embrace gazed into the rapt face of the beloved and saw that it was good. May we all be able to see into the face of the beloved, ourselves, each other, the divine, as we move from this moment of liberation. May we all wish L'Shana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim, L'Shana Haba'ah Yachad, together. And we say together, Amen. Chag Sameach.
Echad Mi Yodea, Echad Mi Yodea, Echad Eloheinu, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ, שניים מי יודע, שניים אני יודע, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ, שלושה מי יודע, שלושה אני יודע, שלושה האבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ, ארבע מי יודע, ארבע אני יודע, ארבע אמהות, שלושה אהבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ, חמישה מי יודע, חמישה אני יודע, חמישה חומשי תורה, ארבע אמהות, שלושה אבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ, שישה מי יודע, שישה אני יודע, שישה סדרי משנה, חמישה חומשי תורה, ארבע אמהות, שלושה אבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ, שבעה מי יודע, שבעה אני יודע, שבעה שבטיה, שישה סדרי משנה, חמישה חומשי תורה, ארבע אמהות, שלושה אבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ, שמונה מי יודע, שמונה אני יודע, שמונה ימי מילה, שבעה ימי שבתא, שישה סדרי משנה, שבשמיים ובארץ, תשעה מי יודע, תשעה אני יודע, תשעה ירחי לידה, 8 ימי מילה, 7 שתיה, 6 סדרי משנה, 5 חודשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, אלו מות אבות, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ, 10 מי יודע, 10 אני יודע, 10 דביה, 9 ירחי לידה, 8 ימי מילה, 7 ימי שבת, 6 סדרי משנה, 5 חודשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, אלו מות אבות, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ, 11 מי יודע, 11 אני יודע, 11 כוכביה, 10 דבריה, 9 ירחי לידה, 8 ימי מילה, 7 ימי שבת, 6 סדרי משנה, 5 חודשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, אלו מות אבות, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ, 12 מי יודע, 12 אני יודע, 12 שתיה, 11 יומיה, 10 דבריה, 9 ירחי לידה, 8 ימי מילה, 7 ימי שבת, 6 סדרי משנה, 5 חודשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, אלו מות אבות, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ, 13 מי יודע, 13 אני יודע, 13 מי יודע, 12 שתיה, 11 כוכביה, 10 דבריה,